Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another NPAN Live. This morning, we're going to be talking about optimizing production yields for profit and efficiency, or in short, the nuts and bolts of tracking yields on your production floor and how to make decisions from the data, right? I'm joined here today by Charlie Bierne, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment, but real quick for our newcomers, we're just going to talk about NPAN very briefly. We're kind of the best of both worlds when it comes to an extension-based community as well as a trade organization. We're not quite one or the other, but we kind of sit in the middle. We help small meat processors and brands thrive through a growing community of shared information, innovation, and educational resources. So we're housed at Oregon State University, and we have all kinds of folks in our network, whether it's extension agents, meat scientists, sales professionals, marketing professionals, butchers, consultants, owners, operators, and former FSIS inspectors. We've just got a lot of people under our umbrella who are all here to form our community. So we offer easy to use and implement tools. We've got a massive website that's super, super deep with lots of resources. We offer one-on-one free technical assistance. If you go on our website and click on technical assistance, you can book free calls with our consultants to help you with your business. It's free, no strings attached. We give grant advice and assistance, educational resources up and down, and a peer-to-peer network by way of our listserv, our Facebook page, and our newsletter that goes out to over 4,000 people once a month. So if you have job postings, we do have quite a bit of engagement there and are very happy to post your open positions if you have any.
$100 during the last round. Here's your chance. You don't waste no time to get yours. Check it.
Okay, and thought maybe we had a question there. So, who makes up NPAN? Just real quick in a nutshell, we're made up of 20% academia, extension, and regulatory. Almost 40% meat processors themselves. Retail shops and brands are right around 12%. Livestock producers, close second to processors at 20%, and then industry reps. We have a lot of people from the industry themselves who are here to help. Today, I'd like to introduce to you Charlie Bierne. He's calling from British Columbia. He's a fabrication operations expert and specialist who currently manages production at 5 different plants, maybe more. Recently, he's taken on some more responsibility, and I'll let him tell you about that. And we're going to be talking about production yields and how to make decisions based on the data today. So before we do that, though, I'd like to get a lay of the land and just understand who's here with us today. So we're going to just share a quick poll, and then we'll let Charlie take it away. And just know all of this data is totally anonymous. So while we can share the results, your name is not linked to it. So you can answer whatever you like. Okay. So just take a few minutes if you don't mind to fill this poll out. If you could, it's super helpful to understand how to best put this programming together for the future and understand who's in our community here today.
Where are we? Southeast. I don't know. We don't actively measure yields.
While everybody's filling out that poll, hopefully everybody can see it. Just a couple of ground rules or recommendations. So Charlie's going to go through a presentation this morning, and it's going to take X amount of time, and inevitably questions are going to come up. If you do have a question, please throw it in the Q&A box, and I will be able to moderate those and get them to Charlie. Or you can raise your hand, use the hand raising function under the reactions button, whichever you prefer. We'd love to have you talk. We'd love to hear your voice. We'd love to see your face. This is more of a round table than it is like a class. So please feel free to raise your hand, and we can have a one-on-one interaction and get some questions out there. The questions that come up in these are really what drive the learning. And our NPAN Live, our community, has always asked some really good and pointed questions. And we really appreciate that. So please fire away as we go, but we definitely will have time at the end for just it's going to be question firing squad at Charlie when it comes to production yield management. So during the presentation or after, it doesn't matter. Totally up to you. Looks like we got about 65% of our participants who have answered the poll. If you have the opportunity, we'll just take another couple of minutes to get this filled out, and then we will we'll share the results very quickly with everyone. Okay. So just looking at our results today, looks like we've got a nice spread. We've got some folks out of the U.S., folks in the Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, Rocky Mountain. Not many out here with me in the Northwest, but that's all right. Glad to see everybody all over the country. We've got a good spread of inspection types: federal, state, custom exempt, and personal use. What's your position or role? We've got some owners, we've got some plant managers, some extension, some academia, some learners. Thank you for joining. And we're pretty much evenly split between yes or no when it comes to, do you actively measure the yields in your facility, which is fantastic. We're really excited to hear from the people that do and the people that don't when it comes to questions and feedback. Do you use any metrics or KPIs to manage your team? We've got some yes, but we've got an overwhelming majority of no, but I'd like to. So you're in the right place for that, and that's a conversation that we can continue to have even after today. Have you educated your staff on the money lost through waste? We're split 50-50, yes and no. And what steps have you taken to reduce waste or loss? We've got some supervisors being responsible for measuring waste. Looks like the majority are supervisors correct wasteful behaviors on the floor. That's excellent. Fix it when you see it. And then some people are using team incentives for lowering waste. So we're really glad to see that. Thank you so much for participating in that. And now we're going to let Charlie take it away. Again, Charlie's here, an operations expert, manages at least 5 plants up in British Columbia. And I've had a great time getting to know him since we've been planning this. So Charlie, take it away, mister.
Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're based. So today I'll do a quick intro on myself, what I currently do, the company I started a couple of months ago, and what the rest of the slideshow will look like. So as David said, I am currently working in British Columbia, Canada. So I directly manage the production out of 5 factories. I also see kind of the retail end of that as well. So I work very closely with a retail division manager on top of that. So I see everything. Basically, we look at when an animal is killed. Once it hits the cooler, I am responsible from getting it from that rail into a box throughout all our plants. And what that kind of whole thing looks like is I manage the yields basically, and I go around to these plants and make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're getting the highest output we can and most out of that carcass as possible. So I do this on a daily basis. My day-to-day is either sitting at a computer looking at product yields, or going around to these plants when I see issues and trying to help them forward. So the size of these plants will be very similar to kind of some of you guys, I think. So the 5 plants I currently work in now, they all slaughter 20, 25, 30 head a day. So roughly anywhere from 110 to 130 animals a day I would be kind of monitoring. So it's fun job, and I really enjoy it. Prior to this, sorry. So prior to this, I am also an accomplished industrial butcher. So I've worked on piece rate lines where we get paid by the piece. I've also worked block rate, carny lines. I've done a couple of years at everything, and then when I moved to Canada, I got in touch with Meadow Valley Meats as a company, and I think I have had probably 8 years in management, the last 2.5 in operations management, senior operations management, part of an executive team. So I do also consult on the side. So I started a company probably 3 months ago, just started. The reason I started this company is, there was lots of plants closing around British Columbia, and we were fortunate enough to be able to go in and take them over. And I was on the decision-making team for these plants that we take them over. And in my opinion, when I walked into these factories, a lot of them could have been saved pretty quickly, actually, to be honest. There was guys then, they just did not know what they were doing. They're cutting up meat after watching videos on YouTube, and they think they can do it, and they couldn't. So the reason I started that company is I would like to help some of the smaller people out there, move forward, help their businesses flourish, because in my opinion, I don't think there is any hands-on, specialist or somebody to help these companies to get to where they need to be and show them what needs to happen in order to run a plant efficiently and, profit effectively from that. So that's kind of myself in a nutshell. What I do currently, I think I'm over about 130, 140 staff. And when push comes to shove, I do get on the line, and I do bone out beef when I have to, and I do make sausage when I have to. And so I'm very familiar with a knife too. So with that being said, guys, I'd like if everyone just had a piece of pen and paper as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take down a couple of numbers throughout the presentation. We'll go through some photos, we'll go through a costing sheet, a product loss sheet, yield loss sheet. Let's see what else I have here on this. And then we'll go through the key takeaways. So I'll look at some minor slaughter stuff. I don't deal a whole pile in slaughter, but slaughter does affect production quite a lot. So if there's issues in the slaughter, that kind of rolls over into production, and that rolls over to your bottom line at the end of the day. So we're going to look at a few issues on the slaughter line. We got some pictures, and we're going to analyze those pictures cost-wise. We're going to look at some issues on the production line, production products. What do you need to look out for? And we'll try and cost this out from a wholesale perspective. And then if you have a shop attached to your factory, then we'll put a retail cost on it. And you'll be kind of surprised with the numbers that I'm going to come out with. Myself and David were speaking before this, and it's significant, and you don't realize you're losing this. And this is what kind of makes or breaks some companies. So without further ado, I'll share my screen right now. Let me just go back. So yeah, this presentation, is that good, Dave? Can you see that? Okay, so
looks great.
This presentation basically will focus on the role of slaughter and production yields in beef processing. We'll explore the various factors and the overall profitability of beef processing and learn about some of the methods used to optimize these yields. So we're just going to look at some very basic things, but these very basic things, they really can make or break a company, and you might not think it.
Hey, Charlie.
Yep.
We can see your notes, just so you know. So if you want to throw it in presenter view, it'll give you a little more space on the screen.
Sorry.
Just in case you had any notes that were like, boy, that David guy sure is funny looking. We'll just, Great.
Is that better?
Looks excellent.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll crack on with this, and we'll start. See if I can get this up here. Sorry, give me 1 second here. So we'll start with this slide here. So where to look for hidden loss and waste in your plant. In my honest opinion, I think you know, you have 20% found in slaughter, which would be down to slaughter processes, and then the other 80% is found in your production. So when you look at the high-end cuts, that is where you lose a lot of your money in these on an animal. But the first thing we're going to look at is your dress and yield for when you slaughter an animal. So generally in the big packers, these guys will be hitting anywhere from 60 to 63%. And just so everybody knows, everything I speak about here, this comes like I deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So I haven't made any of this up. These are numbers that I deal with every single day. So just so you're aware, this does it's quite relevant to me anyways, so it should be relevant to you. So we look at, if you want to take some of these numbers down as well. So the big packers yield anywhere from 60 to 63%. So we'll call it, you know, 60%. So if you look at then your yield slaughter, if you do track that and you're running at 55%, and you see this every day. So, and your animal is at here 350 kilos. So you're missing 5% of that animal, basically. 5% of 350 kilos is 70. Oh, sorry, just by the way as well, I'm sorry, this is in kilos. If you're able to convert it to pounds in your head, that'd be fantastic. So 5% on a 350 kilo animal is 17.5 kilos of loss. Okay. And currently what we are paying up here in British Columbia at a minimum, so this is the minimum cost, we're paying $8 a kilo live for this animal. Okay. So you do the math.
So that's about $4 a pound.
Yeah.
Every pound is about half a kilo, or 1 kilo is 2 pounds, just for everybody's very rough math in your head to keep it nice and even.
So we're looking at $8 a kilo. So that's $140 an animal. That's just one animal. So let's just say, you know, you kill anywhere from 15 to 1,600 animals a year. The cost on that is so significant. And you might not even realize it. Like that low yield there will cost you $224,000 a year. Like that is a huge number, and people don't realize that. And that's just at a 5%, you know, loss of where it should be at. We have seen some of our plants in their, you know, 53, 52, 50. You cost that out per day even. That's expensive when you have 10, 15 animals. That could cost you anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a day. And you don't actually realize that. So that's the first thing you should be looking at on some of your lost money. Where is it? Well, that's where it is, right there. There, if you're consistently hitting low yields, you're talking $200,000 loss a year. So it's something to keep an eye on. You should be tracking it. Every animal should be tracked, and then as a group should be tracked, and then as a year should be tracked. And you know, it's important because that 220,000, that pays people's wages at the end of the day. That pays for new machinery. That pays for, you know, that pays for more staff coming in. It's such a significant money, and that's just at the start. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we look at some of the other slaughter things that I would look for on a production floor that, you know, again, affects your bottom dollar. So here, you know, the slaughter's processes are a critical component of beef processing that directly impacts the yield of the final product. So I have picked out, you know, 3 things. I took these photos probably in the last week on my production floor, on one of my production floors. So I'm going to point out why this is so important. So one of them is beef splitting, especially on the slaughter. If you do, you know, poor beef splitting, you're going to leave meat on a bone, which goes directly into a bin, which means you're just completely losing that. So if we look up on the first picture there, we have the kind of side of a strip line on the top sirloin, and we have a chunk of that that's gone off. So we have that has disappeared. Then we have to trim that up to make it look special, make it look nice and presentable. So you've lost probably 500 grams off that. Okay, so I'm going to base this math here on 2 sides beef, okay, per year. So if you want to write this down, so we have 2 sides, we'll say at 500 grams each. That's a kilo gone per day off a strip loin. And that strip loin is $30 a kilo. So you've just lost $30 from that right there on a wholesale price. On a retail price, then you're looking at $45 you've just lost if you carry this the whole way into retail. Okay, on the next slide then, guys, we're going to look at that ribeye. So that ribeye there it's destroyed. And again, we're not gaining anything back off this. And there's probably a kilo missing off that. Well, kilo 750 to 100 grams, or 750 grams to a kilo missing off that by the time you trim it up. And again, you might regain some of that into trim, but very little. That will go into bin because the rest of that is on the other side of the spinal cord, on that bone. So again, we look at that. We go 1 kilo per rib. We have 2 ribs at 40 kilos wholesale. That's $80 we've lost so far. So in total, we've lost $110 on our day's processing so far. On the next one, that fat, you can see there where the fat has diminished and it's been destroyed from poor skinning. And again, this is a big one if you're skinning, because that fat is worth a lot of money. You might think it, but it is. Again, people like their fat on their steaks. If you don't have it, you then have to trim the beef up nicely or downgrade that strip loin into a different product. So again, there's probably 750 grams of fat on that. That's missing. That should be going into a steak. So we look at that again. We call that strip loin. Price at wholesale is $30. At retail, that's $45. So if you total those up together on those 3 items there, we do 1 head a day. On a wholesale perspective, that's $155. We've just lost on those 3 things. That's only 3 cuts. Okay, on a retail, what we've lost is $242.50. Okay, that's just 1 day. So when you're doing these costings, you should always be looking at the bigger picture. You should be looking at throughout the year, because it may seem significant in that day or that minute or that hour, but it's more significant like when you look at it, wow, this happens every day, every minute, every hour, and once a month or all month, and then all year. So at a weekly cost, with $755 on a wholesale. For retail, it's $1,212. Per month, that's $3,100 loss. Wholesale for retail, that's $4,850 lost. Again, just on these 3 cuts. Okay, so per year, what does that cost you? $37,200 wholesale. We've just lost because somebody is not supervising a guy on a kill floor and he's doing what he wants. On a retail, then we're at $52,000. So you can see from just these small little things, this is what I look out for. And this is just on 1 head of beef per day. Okay, so if you do 10 head a day and this happens on 2 head, you can imagine the cost on that. Now your wholesale is nearly at 80,000 now you've lost. And so on and so forth. So it's super important to make sure that on your kill floor, this stuff is being tracked and is being watched, and your supervisors are in there watching this, because at the time it might not seem significant, but it's money you don't see that disappears down the drain when it should be going into your pocket or back to the staff or back into machinery or back into reinvesting. So from a kill floor perspective, they're the 2 things I would immediately look for. I look for beef splitting, and I look for beef skinning. Okay, on the neck is another one. I don't have pictures here. You can imagine if you do the split wrong on a beef neck, how hard that is to bone it out. Okay, one side is easy, one side is impossible. So what happens? The staff member looks around, there's no supervisor looking, he just fires the whole lot into a waste bin, and that disappears. There's 2-3 kilos gone. And I can tell you from experience that does happen every time. he does not want to waste time, his effort trying to get the meat out of those bones because it's just too hard for him.
Hey, Charlie.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we ask a question? We got a question from Gene. He's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Gene.
Sure, thanks. So I'm a producer in Texas, and I do direct meat sales, and this is really very insightful so far. So my question, just so I understand, because you're using some terms a little bit different than what we are using down here, is these losses or these decreases in what I call hot carcass weight yields are actually affecting the revenue of the processor, because if there's a 3 or 4% loss in that hot carcass weight, I'm normally charged on the hot carcass weight, the rail weight, and so they're actually losing out on that potential revenue that they're getting from me because they're trimming it off in these examples here and tossing it away. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then also, though, Gene, you lose revenue as well because that's meat that you're not going to get back and make your margin on.
Well, and that's generally my complaint is like, look, my yields are low, which means I have less total package weight. I mean, and I typically sell on the hard carcass weight, but I also try to balance it out on my end package weight. So I'm looking, and I've built spreadsheets and models from live weights out of the pasture all the way down to the individual cut weights on yields and stuff, and it just drives me nuts because I can have two. I literally took 3 animals. I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time, but I took 3 animals that hot carcass weights were within 6 pounds of each other, and the yields were drastically different. And it just drove me nuts trying to keep up with it. But this is definitely helping me understand. Now I can go back to the processors and say, this is where you can look for areas to improve and to get us better yields on both sides. Thank you.
Yeah. So one big thing there is the skinning is a big thing there. The skinning is a huge thing there. You have someone inexperienced skinning off fat on a prime grade beef. It's easy for him to just, slice it off. He doesn't care about it. And if it's a thick animal, you may not notice it that much, but it does come down to your yield, and you'll see it on that data sheet or Excel spreadsheet you have. So it is something. The skinning would be one. The dressing, cleaning up of all the bits and pieces around the bottom of the neck is another one. So yeah, I'm glad that helped you, and hopefully you can go back to your processor and mention some of these things. So on the next slide, then we are going to look at the challenges on the production floor about optimum production yields. So it's critical for beef processing operations. There are many different challenges that can make it difficult to achieve these yields. So here are the most common things I see, and these are very, very, very standard. You go into the smaller plants and you may not notice to look at these things, but you really do have to start looking. So I'll go through the 3 photos on the left on the break-in, and I'll cost those out, and then I'll quickly go through the saw work and then poor workmanship. So one of the main things I have done with our company here, we've standardized the break-in in all of our plants. So all the factories break the very same way. There's no ifs or buts about it. And there are specific ways they have to break too. So your cut lines when you're ribbing your beef, like that is so important. Like, so you're supposed to have it between, the 5th and the 12th bone. Okay, that's industry standard, 7-bone rib. Okay, you go to the big packers. So normally what they'll say is you go into the middle of those ribs. You go into the middle. No, you don't. What do the big packers do? Big packers are going to the top of this rib and they're coming to the bottom of this rib to get that extra ribeye each side. Every single big packer does it. Okay, so if you can see in my photo there, right, we had a 4-quarter there that was dry age. You can see like one of the ribs that came back from one of our plants and one of the ribs I cut. Now they're both 7-bone ribs. You look at the difference there. That's 1.5 kilos to 2 kilos of ribeye that was going into chuck roll or going into strip loin. you know, and stuff like that is so important. If you're not looking at this and gaining those extra ribeyes on, you know, 5 head a day, you do the math on that, it's huge, absolutely huge. We look at our strip loin then as well, because the rib, if you can see, has been ribbed at an angle. And then on the bottom, the guy is taking it off your top sirloin completely backwards. So now, in order to square this up, to get steaks out of it, we've lost probably 3-4 kilos of strip loin out of that, just from poor ribbing in the cooler and then poor breaking in the production floor. So the cost on that for the strip loin, this is how I would cost this out, okay? The strip loin, we have 1.5 kilos lost. That's conservative per strip loin. We have 2 strip loins a day. Again, this is 2 sides. So what we'll do is we'll cost it out at $24 because the other $6 we'll put into trim. Okay. So on a wholesale, that works out at $72. For retail, we're looking at $38. We're at $114 loss on a retail there. For your ribeye, we've lost, we call it conservative again, we've lost a kilo on each ribeye. Again, trim is taken into account here. And the other cuts, so we call it $34 per kilo wholesale, and then retail, we'll drop that down to $58. And that works out at wholesale price. We've lost $88 on that ribeye, and as far as a retail go, we've lost $116. Again, for the top sirloin as well, this is down to bad breaking. Our breaker cut it down at an angle because he wasn't watching what he was doing. He's done this to every one of them. So you can see where I'm holding the steel up straight. You can see we're missing a big chunk of top sirloin right there. And if you want to go even further, we're actually also missing some of the tenderloin too. Again, that'll go into trim. But we'll just concentrate on the top sirloin here. So we've lost probably 1.5 kilos of top sirloin there. And I would price that out as, again, $14 a kilo after the remainder goes into trim. And then that was for wholesale, and retail then I would put that at 25. So at two head, that's 3 kilos. So we're looking at, from a wholesale perspective, we've lost $42 on that top sirloin wholesale, and we've lost 75 retail. So what does that look like, you know, per day? So from a wholesale perspective, again, on just these 3 cuts alone, no other cuts, we haven't touched the rest of the carcass yet, we're looking at $202 lost wholesale, 305 retail. That's per day. Per week, 1,010 wholesale, 1,525 retail. Per month, we've lost $4,040 wholesale. Retail, we've lost $6,100 in lost profits. Again, so you look at this per year. Okay, so it's a pretty big number. So we've lost $48,480 wholesale. We've lost $73,200 retail. Okay, so on just those 3 cuts there, and we go back, and these 3 cuts here. So our total that we've lost on just not supervising our staff, our total wholesale is $85,680. Our total retail loss is $131,400. And, you know, this is just with 3 cuts. Like, this list goes on and on and on. So that's the breaking, how important your brief breaking is, and how important your cut lines are. So we look at some of the saw work as well. So we can see this brisket here. You can see it's smaller than the width of my hand. And I think this picture is from a few weeks ago, and we sent it back, and we found out the guy actually had the 4/4 upside down on the saw. So he wasn't actually looking at his cut lines on it, and he was just doing whatever he wanted. So again, we look at the price of that. You've lost your brisket into trim. Okay, that's eventually where it's going to end up. Your short ribs as well you have there. Yeah, look at the size of those things. They should be 3 inches, probably 4 inches bigger than that. That's on a probably close to 400 kilo animal. Those things should be massive. Then We look at dirty bones as well. Dirty bones is another one. You look at the filth on those bones there. Like, and this is your bones, they don't have to be perfect, but this is too much. You've lost all this cuts. You've lost all that meat on bones there, and this is all hip bones. So now your inside is at a loss. Your knuckle is at a loss. Your eye of round is at a loss. Your flat is at a loss. So you're not just losing it to trim, you're losing the yield off all the other cuts too, where this comes off. On the last picture in the bottom right, then we have kind of where your top sirloin is. So you can see a small piece of meat there. That's probably 200-300 grams of tenderloin, and then above that you have your flat meat, probably the same, 200-300 grams flat meat. So we sell flat meat $24.50 in our plant. Okay, when we sell tenderloin at our retails, graded AAA tenderloin, 100 kilos or $100 a kilo. So you do the math on that 300 grams. It's freaking $30 right there. You do that on every single one, every side of beef, $60 a head. Like, so it's small things like these when they look significant at the time, but they do accumulate pretty quickly. And the end of the day, if you're not watching it, it'll shut you down if you're not keeping stuff like this under wraps and keeping on top of it, and keeping on top of your supervisors to go through this and watch for this stuff and correct it too, and make sure they're reporting it to you, telling it that it's happening. You shouldn't have to look at your yields every week too, even though we monitor it closely because we're a group of plants. Your supervisor should be on top of this, spotting this stuff. Your staff should be ambassadors for you. You have to train your staff in the loss of this. Like, what is the actual cost of these issues? Long-term and short-term, what it does for them. So I don't know, does that make sense for everybody? How important this stuff is? Keeping an eye on this stuff, the cost effectiveness and all this, because if we add all this stuff up together, okay, so let's see our yields on our dressing yields. Okay, we're 5% low throughout the year, and then we have 3 issues on our strip loins and ribeyes and the skinning and the top sirloin. Just on these alone, from a wholesale perspective, you'll have lost $309,680. It's over $250,000. From a retail perspective, you'll have lost $355,400 if you have a retail attached. These are big numbers, and if you're not, it can make or break a company. If you start adding other things in on top of this, like your dirty bones, like your poor cutting, you're talking close to $500,000 a year that you just don't see. You think everything is fine and dandy, but it's not. You're missing $500,000, $600,000 that could be in your pocket. So that's basically some of the things that I would look out and look at on the floor. I walk onto a floor, immediately I'm checking for these things. Second nature to me, and it should be second nature to you. You need to be watching this stuff because at the end of the day, it does affect your bottom dollar.
Charlie, I've got a couple of questions that came to me directly, and then one in the chat from Christy. And they all kind of so I'll preface it with Christy's question, and then kind of bring in the other questions for color. She says, I always lowball it for 50% hanging from live and 50% take home from hanging, but it all depends on the cow, the carcass, and the cut sheet. And the other questions that I have sent as direct messages are basically like, in a nutshell, companies like yours have a robust quality assurance program where your producers are sending you a pretty, probably, I assume, standard product.
Yeah, we have our own feedlots.
So for some of our smaller processors, and Gene kind of touches on this, and then a couple other people mention this. For processors that are doing less than 20 beef a day, and it's all fee for service models, is coming from different people. I've managed these plants before. In Michigan, I might get a grass-fed steer from John Nelson, and then I might get from Middleton Family Farms. They just get burned out milkers and Holstein steers, fat as ticks. from the feedlot. So when you've got like various carcass specs coming in, some animals, there could be a swing in yields based on the production practices, the somebody like Gene who's has a clearly a tight quality assurance program on ranch. There's a lot of producers that don't have that, and they just kind of raise up whatever they raise up, and they send whatever they send when they've hit their maximum feeding budget for that animal. Like, I guess my question is, or the collective questions are, how do we, first of all, how do we train? How do we have conversations between producers and processors in a collaborative way to talk about getting the best yield? Because, we still have a lot of processors that are very old school, that are just pushing it through as fast as humanly possible. You know what I mean? We're not paying attention to this nuanced stuff that really affects your bottom line. How do we have a collaborative conversation between producers and processors, so producers truly understand the carcass condition, and then processors are breaking in the most advantageous way to them and the processors? I think maybe that's the first question. Like, how do we handle varying qualities on both sides?
You would first need to start on a lower key. I would start with just monitoring the yield of each animal. If you're able to do that, if you're that small and you're able to do that, start tracking this stuff. It might be a pain. It probably will be a pain to do it animal by animal. But long term, if you collect the data from this over a couple of months, and then show the producers, bring that information to the producers. Like, that's what we do here. We track all of this stuff and we bring the information back to the producers, and they're very welcoming for the most part, in trying to change their ways to benefit both of us.
So really, like a data tracking, a collaborative relationship, tracking yields. At a plant I used to run, we would rib in the cooler. So we would rib and open up shoulders in the cooler to make things easier on the fab team, and I would take a photo. It just took me 2 seconds. Now, I had to be very careful that the person that was using the phone to take the photo wasn't touching carcasses. Obviously, there's like a food safety risk there because phones are listeria breeding grounds. But aside from all that, we were able to keep a visual record because the plant was really small. We weren't doing 100, 200 head a day. We were doing 24 head a day. It was easy for me at the end of the day in the drip cooler to take a photo of every rib and send that to the producer and say, look, this is why you had a 52% yield, because you got a tiny loin and 3/4 of an inch of back fat.
Yeah, and that sometimes can come down to, there's lots of things that affect that, weather, how the animals are being stored, feed they're eating. There's a multitude of things that can, affect your yields. And some of them you're never going to get away from either, which is unfortunate. But again, just sharing some of this information with the producers is so beneficial. For the most part, nobody ever does. They just assume it's fine, and they'll keep going and doing what they're doing until they're told otherwise.
How do we as processors, what's our responsibility to hear that conversation from producers? When a producer, I can say right now that I know, even myself as a plant manager in the past, if a producer came to me and wanted to know how I was breaking their animal and what was going on in the cut room, and that makes me bristle a little bit, right? Like I want to be like, get out, none of your business, and I felt that way in the past when I was under a lot of pressure. The plant was underperforming, or we had high turnover. Like, how do we facilitate? How does a producer? How do we as processors come to that conversation with transparency and an open mind? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But for the producers, the main thing they will be looking at is their dressing yields. Like, that is the main thing. And as processors, you should be doing as much as you can, basically, to get that producer as much as possible, in my opinion. When you start doing that, then the producer will he'll do whatever, they'll do whatever you want for you. They'll be happy to see these numbers coming back increase. Like, we have issues with our yield on our dressing yield on veal here. It was coming in at 53%. And that was at 14 head a week. And, we couldn't figure it out on our end. We ended up losing the producer for that, which is unfortunate because he came to us and in one of our factories, as I said, I mainly deal in production. I don't deal a whole pile in slaughter, but there was issues happening on the slaughter floor. He wasn't happy with it, sent him somewhere else. And unfortunately, that's just what can happen if you're not on top of this stuff. It's up to the farmer or the producer to check on this stuff. And if he's not getting what he needs out of it, you need to be doing a bit better too. It's your problem as much as his, because now you've just lost a bunch of customers because your slaughter processes aren't good enough to get the producer what he needs.
Christy's got a question.
Yeah.
I agree with everything he's saying. As a processor, when I took over this business, it was very combative with all the customers. The man that owned it before me would, like you're saying, they'd miss splicing back in the back, or they'd hack something up and he would lie about it, and it was combative, and customers always came in angry. It was not fun. I mean, every day it was an argument. And the best thing that has happened is we've just become transparent. Like you said, if we mess up, we fess up to it. But these practices on the saw work and getting better at the craft has helped. But having the conversation with, you brought me in an underfed longhorn, I'm not going to be giving you a fat cap that's an inch, like if you brought me in a big old fat Angus, and having those conversations, taking the pictures, like David said. Sometimes they'll ask for that when we have the hot hanging carcasses. If they want to watch us slaughter, we are an open book. We're not hiding anything, and being open like that has really helped a lot of the relationships, along with tracking sheets and those kinds of things. But if you find a processor you can work with, that you can have that open dialogue, they might not want you in their space, their inspector might not let that happen, but try to have those conversations with your processors, because it as a processor, it has really helped us to do better for our customers. We know what they're doing with their beef, we know what their customers want, and building those relationships is key to it all. And we can't, as processors, hide what we're doing, and you as producers need to let us know what you need so that we can explain what we are able to do. Those conversations, I think, like you're saying, Charlie, are just crucial, and having that data back there to back it up is,
the data
has
is
helped us.
the most important thing there. Data
Yeah.
and photos for days.
Photos. My whole thing is photos.
They'll come to your rescue, like whether you know it or not, they always do. And just even that transparency, have that transparency with the guys on the cut floor as well. Tell them there's issues, tell them the money you're losing. They'll really put a bit more effort into it. They really will when they hear about, oh, I'm not doing that good enough, that we're losing so much money. They'll try harder. They'll put in more effort. They will. And you keep at them, they'll be the ambassadors then on that floor. They'll see these problems. In my plants now, I don't have to go on the production floor. The guys will come out and they're friggin' so how our factories work, we have 5 plants that feed one plant. Okay, we have 5 offsite slaughterhouses and we have 1 plant. So it all filters in through 1 plant. And so my guys on my production floor in that big plant, if those guys in the slaughterhouses screw up, do something, I know about it within 30 seconds. And then we go back with the information. So like making sure you're transparent the whole way through the whole process is it's key, really, in my opinion. Making sure everybody knows for the most part what's going on and how these issues affect everybody.
Just before we move on to, sorry, Christy, were you still going? Sorry about that. Just before we go on to the next slide, one thing to mention, you had mentioned sharing with the crew what the losses are. And I think that, having some brief conversations or training sessions on exactly what you're talking about right now, the implications of just inches here and there on the cut floor and how that affects the bottom line and the labor budget and the budget for incentives or bonuses or vacation pay. Like, do you ever have conversations like that with your supervisors, like the actual financial implications of these mistakes or inconsistencies, Charlie?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. Everybody is aware of it. The one thing we say to them, we track these yields, and over 3 to 6 month period, if you're on track, you come looking for a pay rise, you'll get it. But if we keep seeing these issues, don't come looking for them. But at the end of the day, you've seen the amount of money just taking a bit of care can get back in your pocket. So what is, a $2 or $3 pay rise to one person who's breaking this beef when they're actually probably making you maybe $300,000 more a year? So make sure you do, let the staff know that. Let your managers, let your supervisors know how important it is, and put KPIs in place for these guys. Tell them you need to be hitting, a 73% bonus yield on these Holstein cattle, or our ribeyes need to be at 6% for more than X amount of time. The difference that they think then, well, I'm going to get something out of the end of this. It's kind of like a carrot on the end of the stick thing, which is a bad way to put it. But it does work, reward for them working hard and making sure it's done correctly. Like, we have it across mainly our main production facility. In one of the slaughterhouses that does all our graded and premium beef, we have it there as well. Not so much in the other ones, but it's definitely effective. It's super easy to implement once you start tracking this stuff. Literally, you can look at it and it's like, oh, no, percentages is down. You go back to them, let them know you're down a percent, you need to work on this. Super, super easy.
I know we've got about 20 minutes left before our hard stop for today. And anything that we don't get to, Charlie, I personally speaking would love to have you back to do a deeper dive on some of this stuff. But is there did you have anything else you wanted to share before I continue to dive into the questions?
I will very quickly go over what very simple costing sheet looks like on products.
And this is a tool that you are going to make available for download on the YouTube page where the replay is, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So I use this one. I put some things on it just to make it look a bit easier, and you can highlight some aspects. You can tailor it towards however you see fit. So I've done this. Let me just pull it up here. So this is kind of a basic costing sheet that I would use. So if you look at this, you can do this for anything really. Sausages, beef processing, primal changing, anything that's boxed that you want to bone out, you want to look out your yield on it, your percentage, how much you're going to make. So I've basically put in just beef insides, and what we're going to do is 2 boxes of beef insides. We're going to denude it, and we're going to look at, the yield off this product and why it's important. And the reason this is important to me, because I recently did a test on this with a pallet of insides. And so if we look at here, this yield, we're at 88%. So my yield came back on my insides at 60%. So when you put that in 60%, we've actually lost some money on that animal there, because we did it on a pallet, so we lost quite a bit of money on the pallet. And then the test was done after, and we found out that the over trimming was the cause of this. So basically, I'll just walk through it. So we have 40 kilos in, cost of $12 a kilo, which is $480. Then we look at one cutter to open, cut, and repack that product. Took them, half an hour or 30 minutes at $23. Cost $11.50. Cost of our cryovac bags, cost of our boxes. Then we look at our outputs. So denuded insides, we had 24 kilos. Then we had 85% trim. I value that at $9 a kilo, because you might put it into burgers or something after. But this gives you a basic kind of idea of, how much it's going to cost. So total cost in, we spent $497. Total cost out, $400. we've actually lost $92.30 on that. So that's just with these numbers. So that should give you, right, we did it once. Should we do it again? Definitely not. That product is not going to make us money. So we look at the yields. So you can imagine if you put a whole beef in here, you would track your outputs, your inputs. You have up here, we put in one beef side, the cost, how much it cost you. On your outputs then, you don't have to fill in any of the boxes or anything like that or cryovac bags. What you can do then is put every cut on the outside here, and then you look at your weight out. And then you'll do is you'll get that yield off your input weight, which would be 40 kilos. You can imagine this 24 is 60% of that 40. So you would then, for me, what I do is I would take this and I would leave that as my standard if you do it correctly. Say you're costing out a beef for your processing throughout the year. You would do that and then you would do it to the best of your ability. And you would do it clean and you would make sure your bones are clean. And then every time you run beef, then you would compare what, day 245 was to your standard. And then you'll know every time how much money you are losing, how much money, you potentially could be making throughout the year. It's a pretty standard thing, but it's so effective. You need to be doing it for everything. Sausages, burgers, hams, you name it. If it's going into a chub, if it's going into a liner, you need to be doing this. You're boning beef, you're boning veal, you're boning bison, you're boning lamb. You need to be doing this. No ifs or buts about it. This will give you, a cost average of what you're going to make or what you're going to lose, and it'll help you see where you're winning and where you're losing. It's so important. So this will be available on the YouTube video after. Again, you can tailor this. I have some formulas in there, so you can just copy the formulas and scroll it down. If you do, or pull the formulas down just for every tab down on the bottom. If you do need help or need to adjust it, just get in contact with me. It's not overly hard to do it either. The second sheet I have to show you guys is to do with the yield loss calculator. So I would look at this for my boneless yield on Holstein beef. So Holstein beef is poor, dry dairy cattle that are not great beef. We normally put that stuff into trim, most of it. For the most part, we save the hip cuts or whatever. But again, I would expect a 70% boneless yield off that. On those cattle, I really wouldn't look at the primal cuts. I'd look more so for the trim off it. So then if you're doing, 20 head a day and we're at, 65% yield, boneless yield. Okay, so if we come down here, on 1 head a day, 5%, $17. I'll put the cost in here of trim at $5. So this is cost of loss per kilo. Put it in at $5. Generally, if you lose off your primals, it goes into trim. Okay, that's how it usually happens. If one aspect of your yield is low, something else is high. Your beef is going to be going somewhere. Your ribeye is too small. Your trim is going to be, your ribeye is low. Your trim is high. But if your trim is low, it's normally where that goes is into the bin. Somewhere or another, it finds its way into a bin. If your other yields are fine. So again, we look at, cost of 5, we were at 65, we boned out 20 head of beef. So we look at 20 head here. This is a kilo per head, and then we're going to come down here. So per day, what 5% on 20 head is? It's $1,750 of trim lost. Okay, per week, it's $8,750. Per year, $437,000. Okay, guys, as I said, the reason I made this is for our own plants. And I use these numbers, to highlight when we're doing our poor cattle, how much money we potentially are losing every time. Their bonus yield is low. I come and look at it. This is low. This is how much you guys lost today. Explain yourself. Why is this lost? This was going on for a 3 or 4 month period where they were hitting low 60s. So they were 10% down. So when we really dived into it to figure out what the problem was. And this kind of touches on two things here. One, their bones were dirty, whatever, they weren't just paying attention. That was one of them. The second thing was we found out they were leaving their Holstein animals hang for 8 or 9 days. So, over 24 to 48 hours, you might lose 3%. If you hang those animals for 8, 9 days, you're going to lose 8, 9% of the animal. Then does it actually justify even boning those animals out if you're going to lose all this money? And this kind of ties into myself and Dave were talking about this dry aging a full side of beef. Guys, it's insane. The money you can lose on dry aging graded beef if you're doing a full side. If you're losing 6, 7% on an animal that's costing you $8, $9 a kilo, that is not worth it. It's not. You can age it, put it into a bag, bone it out, put it into a bag for 3 weeks. You get the same tenderness out of it. In my opinion, anyways. The dry aging is more, for the most part, kind of a novelty. In my opinion, no, it's fine for a week or two if you're doing select cuts, but never ever do a full side of beef because you'll never make money on it.
And that's a really a conversation that we could probably have in a dedicated session, but just as a brief inflammatory statement to our crowd here. On a biological level, nothing happens after 12 days of hanging. Maybe 14. But ultimately, dry aging takes a very, very precise set of controls that keeps your relative humidity, temperature at a certain place in your cooler, and there has to be extremely robust sanitation practices to make sure that the mycological growth, aka mold and yeast spores, don't grow. Right? That's what a true dry age does. What happens in 99% of small processors, very small and small establishments, is that they don't have extremely robust sanitation practices. The mold and yeast builds up, and the quote-unquote flavor concentration that you get under a 3-week, 4-week dry aged carcass is really, it's mold. It's mold flavor. And your yield, to Charlie's point, is insanely low. I think we would hang for 21 days at a plant that I managed, and I know that we quantify between a 5 and 8% loss just in that process before we even cut it. Does that sound right to you, Charlie?
Yeah, on those fat animals, yeah. On the Holstein with no fat on them, the water just evaporates straight out of them. So with that, guys, I'll just follow up a few key points or a few key takeaways. So we've gone through most of these today. I know we haven't got much time left, so I'll try and get through the impact of some of this stuff. Consumer perception, low yields higher the price of your product, whether you know that or not. So in order to make up for a ribeye being too small, you have to raise the price of other products. It lowers the quality of your beef, and then it reduces your demand. Some of the corrective actions: ensure you're tracking this stuff, guys. Without measurement, you can't fix it. You can't improve it. Educate your employees. Turn your employees into ambassadors for saving. Do costings on every product. Have a presence on your production floor. Be on the lookout for key areas with the most profitability. Start targeting your ribeyes, your tenderloins, your strip loins, the products that make you the most money. Make sure they're fixed first, and then work on the other things. And just conclusion and key takeaways, maximizing production yields is essential for success. Factors that impact yields on the production floor: low yields can significantly impact profitability and demand. And again, I'll keep echoing this: without measuring it, you can't fix it. And just being aware of this stuff as well. And that is that, I believe, from my end. If you have any questions.
Yeah, has anybody out there got any questions? I'm going to take a look at the chat really quick. I know Gene mentioned that he's got a producer side yield tracker that he wouldn't mind sharing on the screen. I want to take a look see if we have any questions that we've missed so far. Let's see. Let's see. So Nelson from the American Association of Meat Processors asks, let's see, what's the yield for what is the yield for the retail or boxed beef amount from the original live weight of the animal? I've seen around 43%, he says.
For us, it kind of can vary from place to place, to be honest. We'll start with that because everybody does everything different. There's every cut comes out differently depending on your specs, what you're selling. An example is I worked in plants in the UK and they would cut top sirloins bigger on one day and smaller on another, and strip loins bigger on one day and smaller on another. It can honestly vary. To be honest, and I can't give you a straight answer on that one. For us, we generally look at 75% boneless yield on our graded beef, and then when you add in bones and everything like that, we usually touch around 84%.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. We've got about 5 minutes. Gene, did you want to share your producer yield tracker with the crew here?
Sure, I've got it up. I don't have an option to share. Can you pass that to me?
Oh, shoot. That's interesting. Let me see. It should show at the bottom of your screen. It's enabled for all participants.
So I have mute, but let me go under participants. Maybe I get it. Nope. Chat QA. Oh, there it is. Right in the middle. Let's see here. What the hell did I do? Here it is. Okay, so what you should see is a spreadsheet that says custom meat analysis beef. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what I have here is one of the questions that came up was this helps to address that. And so as you can see here, I start with what's the live weight on the ranch, what's the before slaughter, and then any shrinkage that I might have during transportation. Then what's the live weight when I arrive at the processor? Then what is my dressing percentage? So what you'll see out here in the notes, one of the questions was, what are some of those industry averages in some of these losses? So you should expect to see a 4 to 5% shrinkage just in transportation, roughly a 62 to 63% average of hot carcass dressing percentage. Then based on the original live weight, all these that are gray, they're formulas based on whatever percentages that you put in. So the hot carcass weight was at a 62% yield on a 1,150 pound animal, would give us 684 pounds of hot carcass weight. Then one of the comments I made, which also came up, is the aging can really catch you off guard if you're not taking in consideration that you're going to see a 4 to 6% reduction in your shrinkage for aging. And then that'll give you what I call a chilled carcass weight. Then still back to that question that was asked earlier on, was just traditional fabrication loss is 21%. Your bones will be about 15%. And then what is your carcass cutting yield? That's something you would put in there, what you're looking for. And that's going to be, I'm looking to get that as to what is that co-carcass weight all the way to the individual package weight. And that really varies. Offals 5%, and then your pelt is 6.5%. These are based on industry standards. So what that should give me, based on the formulas, is a packaged meat weight of roughly 40% of the live weight on average. It's 421 pounds of packaged meat. Bones are 99 pounds, offals are 32, and the pelt 72. So then that just kind of gives me from start to finish of what my animal is. This next area was really important for me. I found a chart that had this, and was the primal breakdown is, based on these averages here were based on the article or the YouTube that I think it was an article. And So based on these percentages, it then calculates what is my total chuck weight, my rib weight, my loin weight, all those primal weights. And then for each of those primals, breaking them out into how much is edible of that weight up here, how much of it is going to be edible, how much will be ground and stew, and then how much is inedible. And those are based on percentages. You can plug those in, and then it'll actually calculate on a primal basis how many pounds of edible packaged meat you're going to get, how much of that to ground, and then how much of that is going to go into inedible based on a poundage. And then that'll give you, down here, this number here that I'm at down here should give you the 654 that matched up above. And so anyhow, so that's a really good, if you can come up with what your percentages are, then you can begin to break that carcass down into the primals and really tell the customer you should expect on your shoulder, your chuck, this is the total weight of edible meat you're going to get out of that shoulder. And it's just educating the customer, which I think was mentioned several times. Then I came in, and for me, I started applying some dollar amounts, just as the presenter did, to those individual pricing points on weights. And then I can calculate at the very bottom of it on a per animal basis, what are my revenue opportunities? I'm here now. What are my revenue opportunities? What are my cost of goods sold? And then what is my net profit? And this is from a retail perspective. Generally, what I do is I've modified this a little bit. Is I try to adjust my pricing to where I make at least $1,000 per animal, and with what I'm doing in my direct sales. So hopefully this helps you. Another comment I made was, you have your beef numbers, your pork numbers, they're going to be different. These percentages from the top all the way down, they're going to be different. So a lot of the processors that I deal with will do beef, pork, lamb, as well as goat for me. And so I have to keep in mind what my different percentages are on per species. So that's really all I had to show. If y'all have any questions, you're welcome to ask them.
Thanks, Gene. Really appreciate that. Yeah, this is a great tool. This is every producer should be running something like this, and it's fairly similar to what plants use. Plants will do these individual yield tests all the way down to the finished product. Charlie, I'm sure you've got something really similar you use on the floor. It's a great way to keep track of things. Gene, thanks a lot for sharing this, and would love to. I think this would be a great thing to share with our upcoming Western Meat School cohort that we're going to have, which I'd love to chat with you about when we get a moment. A couple comments from Charlie. We'll hit Nelson, and then we got to go. We're at our hard stop. Charlie, any thoughts?
No, this is fantastic. The only comment I would say is, Gene touched on it too. Every plant or factory does it differently. So I wouldn't go off a YouTube video. I would do it yourself. Get those percentages yourself nailed down. It's the only thing I would do if that was me. And then you have a freaking 100% accurate, idea of where you need to be on every animal. That's a fantastic spreadsheet you have there. Well done.
Yeah, really well done, and super helpful. I mean, it shows you exactly what's going on the ground at your plant and what happens. On the ground at your farm and what happens after the plant. Really good stuff. Nelson, what do you got?
I was just going to ask Gene to show his pork tab there, but he did. So thank you very much for that.
And I'll raise sheep. So lamb is the main one I do. It's the last one I have to complete. I haven't fully finished it yet. So, but I sell more lamb than anything, but beef is the easiest to sell when it comes to selling, from a kind of a middleman perspective. With what I do, beef's a lot easier to sell than lamb is.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks everybody. Gene, Christy, everybody in the chat that had great questions. Really appreciate this. This has been a great session. I learned a lot from Charlie leading up to this, and even more today. And there's a lot more to learn. But I think the thing that I'd like to follow up on in maybe part 2 of this would be a little bit more of a group discussion potentially. Would really like to have Charlie back, talking about how do we facilitate the conversation between producers and processors in a way that where we both say, like, look, we're two sides of the same coin. We're both leaving money on the table. High tide raises all boats, and the adversarial relationship between processors and producers that historically exists in a lot of places, it just causes both parties to lose more money. How do we work together and have that conversation in a way that gets us both to win and ensures the longevity and sustainability of both sides, right? Because producers, they don't like to see processors going out of business and selling for pennies on the dollar. Processors don't like to see producers suffering with their sales prices and their on the hoof prices. We don't like to see that, right? And we surely don't like when the fingers are pointed in both directions. Like, there's a way for us to both capitalize on some information, some transparency, and some of the lessons that Charlie's got to learn, or that Charlie's got to teach us here. I think that if we can find a way to have that conversation, which, you know, is not always easy, I think that we can all make a lot more money and be a lot happier. Any parting thoughts, Charlie? Thank you so much for coming today, man. I really, really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to working with you more. And we want to make sure that your information is posted for folks to get a hold of you to ask further questions. So that's going to be, I don't know if you posted that slide or not, but we'll make sure the slideshow is in the comment section of the YouTube video as well as on the NPAN site. You'll have links to those resources to download. The spreadsheets are going to be available for the viewers. Gene, if you want to share a blank template of your spreadsheet, you know, we'd be happy to share to the viewers. Jamie, just so everybody knows, this is just wrapping up here in a moment. To a private question I just got. Charlie, any parting thoughts?
Just keep vigilant, keep your eyes open, and you don't realize money you're actually losing until you start, tracking it every day. What's small one day is big in a year. And that's actually everything. Always, when you're doing these cost guys, always look at it over a year. Always. Never anything smaller. Always price it out at a year. That's all I have. Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome. Nice job, Charlie. Thanks everybody else for joining us on another NPAN Live. The next one is going to be with the Humane Handling Institute of the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Dr. Kurt Vogel and Ashlyn Kirk are going to be with us explaining their program, and we're going to go through some real life issues in humane handling that have actually happened in plants that happen to us regularly, right? It's things that we all deal with. We're going to go through those issues live at the end of the month on October 26th, and then we're going to take all your humane handling and slaughter and stunning questions. So we're really excited about that. Please sign up for it. It's on our website. And Charlie, we're really looking forward to having you back as soon as possible. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys.